Well, we are now into the Western Conference part of the season preview, and the first team that I am going to be talking about out of the Western Conference in terms of season preview is none other than the Colorado Rapids. So, the Rapids last season, they finished the season with 12 wins, 6 draw, and 16 losses, but keep in mind, most of those losses came in the first 11 games of the season when they went winless. They had 42 points to finish off the season. They scored 58 goals last season, which is by far the most that they have scored pretty much in the last couple of seasons. I mean, when is the last time the Rapids scored more than 50 goals? Let alone, when is the last time they actually scored more than 45 or 40 goals a season? It was very bizarre seeing the Rapids regularly hitting the ball into the back net, because that's not what this team has been, and that's not what this team identity has been for the last couple of seasons. But yet, at the same time, I don't mind the fact that they like to score a lot of goals, and that of course does improve their chances in terms of winning game. The only problem is they did concede a lot of goals. 63 goals they conceded last season, although bear in mind, a lot of that came in the beginning of the season. They did get better in terms of defending as the seasons go, but they still concede 63 goals, which was one of the most in the league. And their goal differential was -5. Now, last season summary, they finished ninth in the Western Conference. They came inches from making the playoffs. And in fact, as I mentioned throughout last season, I talk about how this team, I didn't think this team had a shot of making the playoffs after that horrendous start that they had. And that I was basically counting the days that they were going to be eliminated, and that they were basically they were on the brinks of elimination pretty much every single week in that last month, and yet it took them all the way to decision day when they finally got eliminated, which is also why I really appreciate what the Rapids done last season, and that they just had that never say die moment where they're up for elimination every single week, and yet they still refuse to die and refuse the fact that they have a chance of making the playoffs, and they almost pulled off a miraculous kind of comeback by actually making the playoff. Like, imagine if this team actually made it the playoffs after all the things that have gone on throughout the season, and after all the time they've been up for elimination, that somehow they still make it to the playoffs because of that. They got knocked out in the fourth round of the U.S. Open Cup. Obviously, the U.S. Open Cup isn't something the Rapids has been good at, and this last season in terms of the U.S. Open Cup, it was no exception, and unfortunately, they're one of those teams that got knocked out by a USL Championship side, and I believe it was New Mexico United that actually knocked them out in the U.S. Open Cup. Now, in terms of player that they bought in, as I said, the Rapids is another team that I think could really be a team that is up there as having one of the best off season of any team in MLS. And when you look at some of the addition that they made, they of course signed Lawless Abubakar on a permanent deal for a ridiculous cheap amount of just around 400,000 game that they have to pay to Columbus to get him on a permanent deal. They also brought in Austin Trusty from the Union. They brought in Drew Moore from TFC. Also, Nicholas Benezet, another player that they brought in from TFC. And they're also going to get Brian Galvin, who is going to be joining this team in July from Athletic Cologne down in the Argentine Premier League. Now, in terms of player that is out of this club, unfortunately, Tim Howard, he of course retired last season, and it's kind of a little bit sad the fact that he kind of retired as a player with the Rapids with a little bit of a whimper. I mean, there wasn't really much that he of course done that can end his career on a high, but still, it was a great career for Tim Howard, and that I mentioned throughout last season, we always will remember him as probably the greatest goalkeeper, not only in MLS, well, not really MLS, but in U.S. men's national team history, with the way that he's been just incredible with the national team, and definitely going to be into the Hall of Fame. Kofi Apari, Tommy Smith, Sam Ribbons, Dylan Cerna, and Axel Schuber are all no longer with the club. Only Axel Schuber I know for a fact that is with another team. He is actually, I think he's with Columbus right now, if I'm not mistaken. And all these other players are either retired or they still haven't found a club after their option got rejected. Now, in terms of goal scored for this team, I'm going to go with Kai Kamara because he was the leading goal scorer for this team, but I could have easily gone with a couple of other guys like Diego Rubio and maybe even Rookie of the Year Andre Shinyashiki that also contribute in terms of the goal scoring department. Basically, this team last season, for the first time in what has been forever for the Rapids, they actually found a goal scorer not only in Kai Kamara, but they also find a couple of other goal scorers that is able to put the ball into the back of the net. Now, in terms of playmaker for this team, I'm going to say Jonas Nemio. I mean, they spent big money on this guy, and as I said before, the Rapids, I feel like the missing pieces that they had in terms of the squad that I really think that they could get them into the playoffs is that they need that true number 10. And right now, they of course able to get this true number 10 in the offseason and actually pay DP money to get Jonas Nemio for his service. And we'll see if he does well with the Rapids and whether or not if the DP contract that the Rapids, of course, reward him will pay it off. I mean, the only thing that I'm a little bit concerned about the Rapids getting him is that the Rapids doesn't have a good history in terms of getting high quality kind of DP player to come to play their team, and that it doesn't really quite work out. So, but we'll see if Jonas Nemio can potentially change that, and potentially he could really be the guy that not only pulls the string for this team, but maybe he could be the MVP of this team. Which, speaking of the MVP for this team, and I think this is for the first time in most of my season preview where I usually always award the MVP and the most important player to the playmaker, because the playmaker and the creative player are usually the most vital part of a team. But this time, I'm actually going to say Lawless Abubakar is going to be the MVP of this team. And I think this is going to be one of the rare cases that I award defender as the most valuable player. I mean, I think ever since he came to Colorado last season in the middle of the season on loan from Columbus, he has really revolutionized that back line and have really stable that back line a little bit. I mean, I know, as I said, the goals allowed this season from the Rapids doesn't really show the fact that he has revolutionized the back line, but if you look at what happened in the second half of the season, there is no doubt the Rapids have conceded less goals than they had in the first half of the season, which is why there was a lot of big discussion of whether or not if the Rapids can hold on to him, and that they might have to pay upward around $1 million of TAM to try to get Abubakar on a permanent deal at Colorado. And it's also why I'm just absolutely stunned doing this offseason when they literally got him for only $400,000 allocation money and an international spot, and that they actually got more, they had to pay more for Austin Trusty from the Union than they had to pay for Lawless Abubakar. I mean, that I'm still kind of just bewildered in terms of that transaction, and that I think of all the crazy transaction that we had this off season and all of the ones that you're thinking, how in the world did this transaction actually went through? This is going to be right up near the top of that list. Now, in terms of surprise package, there was definitely a couple of names that I could have put on there. And also for the MVP, I could have also gone with a couple of different players besides Lawless Abubakar. And, for the surprise package, as I said, it's nothing different, where I would have easily gone with maybe even the Rookie of the Year, Andre Shinyashiki, kind of like what I did with the Union, where I kind of gone with Brendan Aronson, who was a runner-up as a surprise package. I could have maybe even gone with some of the other young guys like Sam Vines, Cole Bassett on this team. But I'm actually going to go with Jonathan Lewis, because I thought when he came to Colorado, this was another guy that really adds some more threat in terms of the attack and really adds some speed in terms of the wing area. And I really like what this kid is doing, and that, obviously things did not work out for him at NYCFC, and that I feel like him getting out of NYCFC and joining the Rapids was probably the best thing to do, which sounds weird because I think a couple of years ago, if you would have told me a player would be leaving a big club to trying to join the Colorado Rapids, you would think that that would be a huge downgrade, considering you are basically leaving a club that could potentially compete for MLS Cup to a team that has been just spinning its wheel and are usually find themselves in the basement. But that's not the case anymore with this Rapids team, and that I think this Rapids team definitely will be competing this year. And one of their surprise package is definitely going to be Jonathan Lewis, who is not only going to provide the goals, but also provide that speed on the flank. And I'm very excited to see how he's going to do. Now, what I like about the Rapids, as I said, I really love the offseason acquisition that they have made. I mean, I didn't know here on the acquisition list, it doesn't seem like they brought in a lot of names, but you got to keep in mind they also brought in players to kind of repair some of their biggest weakness during the second part of the last season. I mean, they bought probably the biggest one from last season when they acquired Lawless Abubakar on a loan from Columbus, and that was a piece to try to fix up the back line. And even if you go back to last season when they got Kai Kamara, a guy that could be the goal scorer of this team, Diego Rubio, another creative player on this team and also a goal scorer. And now this offseason, they not only strengthen up that back line with signing Abubakar on a permanent deal, but also getting Austin Trusty, which is an up and coming defender. A couple of some defensive pieces like Drew Moore and Nicholas Benezet, and they also, most importantly, secure a DP signing in Yunus Namil, who could really be the final piece of the puzzle for this Rapids team to really make some noise heading into next season. Now, one big question I do have with the Rapids is not, are they going to start the season well? Because I think I have kind of mentioned enough about the winless start they had last season, and I have no doubt that it's not going to happen this season, and that this season they're going to start just as good as they will start just as good and pretty much picked up from where they left off from the second half of last season, which last season, especially the second half of it, they were really on verge as being one of the best team in the league. I mean, if you just took the record that they had past that 11 game winless run that they had started the season, they would have been ranked right near the top part of the Western Conference in terms of point wise. And as I said many times before, the only reason why they didn't make the playoffs and barely missed it is because of that bad run that they had to begin the season. The real question that I do have with them is that who would they actually bring for the next two DP slots? So the other big thing about the Rapids this offseason, and another big thing that they show in terms of progressing forward, is that they finally got out of those DP contract. Like Tim Howard, we will always remember him as a guy that, certainly was one of the bigger signing for the Rapids, but also one of the worst signing for the Rapids because they secure him on a DP contract, and the old saying in terms of designated player rule, and that there's this unwritten rule in the designated player rule, and it's kind of like a cardinal sin. You never sign a goalkeeper on a designated player contract, and I guess the Rapids kind of learned that the hard way, and for a long time they got stuck this DP contract on Tim Howard. And this year finally they're able to not have that issue anymore since Tim Howard is retired, and they also got rid of a couple of their other DP. I remember, was it last year they actually got rid of another bad DP contract in Gashi, and now they have all three. Well, they spent one of the DP slot on Yunus Namil, but coming into this off season they had all three DP slot. They fill in one of them. What are they gonna do with the next two? I mean, for me, I think I wouldn't say they will spend one on goalkeeper. I mean, I'm pretty sure they learned their mistake from decided to give a DP contract to a goalkeeper, even though goalkeeping is still one of the biggest thing that I have question about this team. I know Clint Irvin last season when he stepped into the role that Tim Howard was in when Tim Howard was injured, he looked pretty decent at times, but also at times looked very shaky. So maybe they may need another goalkeeper in place of that spot. But also the fact that, I feel like the way that they're going to spend their next two DP really depends on how they're going to do in the start of the season, because I know for the rest of the season, I'm pretty sure the Rapids are done with their off-season edition, and I think as we get into the middle of the season, we're gonna see how the Rapids do. If the Rapids does get into a level where it seemed like this team can definitely compete for the playoffs, that's when they're gonna probably sign a couple of DP, and most likely I would think it would be some attacking designated player, because most of the team, they usually, when they sign DP player, it's usually in the midfield or on the attacking end, although this team does have a lot of good attacking pieces, so I'm not quite sure, do they really need another one? Maybe they can get like a designated player striker up there. I mean, I know Kai Kamara is the main goals scorer of this team, but Kai Kamara is also getting up to that age, and that I know he has been providing just a lot of goals for the past couple of years, even though he's getting very old, and that he's trying his best to defeat Father Time. But eventually in the future, I think the Rapids might be thinking about a DP striker, and they also might be thinking maybe a DP midfielder out there that can really boss the midfield position. So we'll see how they're going to spend their next two DP, and most likely I'm guessing they're going to either spend it during the summer transfer window, or they're going to maybe do it in the next transfer window, which is in the next off season. But yeah, there you have it. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this, and if you're a Rapids fan, what do you think of the addition that your team has done in the off season? What do you think is going to be the main goal scorer, the playmaker, the MVP, and the surprise package? What do you like about this team coming into this season? And what is the biggest question, besides the fact that you're worried that this team is going to get off to another slow start like last season? Let me know in the comments below. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. And I, of course, will see you guys next time. And tomorrow, I'm going to be doing the Texas team in terms of the season preview, as I'm going to be doing FC Dallas and Houston Dynamo for the season preview tomorrow.